Hello?
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah, Shruti, you're talking, right?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah.
Uh,
You're audible.
I am Shruti Raimori, a postgraduate student in the Department of English at Presidency University, Kolkata.
Right.
This is our first parallel session one. This session is to be chaired by Dr. Karthick Manoharan. Dr. Karthik Manoharan is a Marie Sklodowska-Curie Research Fellow at the University of Wolverhampton, where he is working on the political thought of Perrier E.G. Ramaswamy. His monograph, Perrier, A Study in Political Atheism, the first book-length treatment of Perrier's approach to religion, has recently been published by Orient Black Swan. He is also the author of Transcending, Identity and Resistance, published by Orient Black Swan in 2019, and the co-editor of Rethinking Social Justice, also published by Orient Black Swan in 2020. Now, over to you, sir, for conducting the rest of the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shruti, for the introduction, and I'm really happy to be here today to be the chair of this panel. I read through your papers, and they were excellent, and I really look forward to a very nice and interactive session. And thanks also to Mahitosh for inviting me to chair this session, and to Presidency University for organizing this event. Thank you all. So, without taking any further time, let me just very briefly introduce the authors and the papers. So, the first paper will be Beyond Brahminism, the Transcending Cinematic Representation of Dalits in Article 15 and Bhim. The authors are Sucharita Sharma and co-authored by Ankita Choudhary. Dr. Sucharita Sharma is an assistant professor and additional head Department of English at IIS Jaipur. She holds a PhD degree in English with specialization in trauma and Black motherhood. Dr. Ankita Choudhary is an independent scholar. She was awarded her PhD in March 2002 from the Department of English, IIS University, Jaipur. And she completed her post-graduation in MA English and Comparative English from Mahatma Jyotirao Phule University, Jaipur. The second paper will be Dalit Citizenship through Indian Films, and the authors are Smitana, Saikia, and Vinay Kumar. Dr. Smitana Saikia teaches at the School of Development, Azim Premji University, Bangalore. Big shout out to you. I was formerly employed at the School of Development, Azim Premji University. So I hope you're having a great time over there, Smitana. And her co-author is Mr. Vinay Kumar, who teaches reading and writing courses at the School of Arts and Sciences at Azim Premji University. Shout out to you also, Vinay. I've got a very good friend at that school as well. So welcome to both of you. A special welcome. Yeah. The paper 3 will be by Miss Gayathri SS, and it is on theorizing Dalit feminism in Mollywood, questioning casteist progressive ideology propagated by the mainstream feminist cinema. Gayathri is a research scholar working in the area of Dalit feminism in Kerala context at the National Institute of Technology, Calicut, Kerala. She completed her postgraduate at the University of Hyderabad and her MPhil from the Institute of English, Kerala. The paper 4 will be Theorizing Anticaste Movement, a critical analysis of Ranjith's Kaala, and the author is Neeraj Bunker. I'm really sorry if I'm pronouncing some of your names wrong. Please do feel to correct me when you guys make your presentations. So, Neeraj Bunker is a PhD student at the Department of English, Linguistics and Philosophy at Nottingham Trent University, Nottingham, with a specific interest in caste, Dalit, and cinema. Prior to joining his PhD, he got a BA in Political Science from Kirorimal College, University of Delhi, an MA in Social Work from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. So let me hand over the floor to Sucharita Sharma and Ankita Choudhary. I welcome to make your presentation. And I request the other people to keep your computers on mute.
So, good morning to all, and good morning, Karthik sir. Hope I am audible and visible. Thank you. So, without wasting much time, I would like to begin my presentation. And I would also like to mention that to be within the time limit and not to take more time, we have also chopped off certain section, the introductory section of our paper, because we would like to focus more on the analysis of the two movies that we have chosen as the primary text for our research. So here I begin. The title of my paper is Beyond Brahminism, the Transcending Cinematic Representation of Dalits in Article 15 and Bhim. Raymond Williams, in his essay Culture is Ordinary, explains that culture is the sum total of shared beliefs and values of a society. These beliefs and value systems become the base for the construction of various social institutions like law, education, family, religion, and gender, and are signified through various other cultural artifacts such as art, literature, painting, folklore, mythological stories, music, movies, etc. These artifacts, such as art, in all their varied forms, are an important component of human life through which they either present an imaginative facet of the life around them or the realities of their surroundings. But, being a product of man, these artifacts are deeply integrated within the structures of society on which they are based. In the present world, the art form which greatly influences our modern life is cinema, as it engages the audience in a complex manner by appealing to most of their senses. From emotional family dramas to romantic comedies to action thrillers, cinema derives its life substance from the socio-political surroundings, thus reflecting through the stories, characters, and themes even the hushed issues of society. The mass appeal of cinema is not only the result of the surreal image of the real in real, but also because it is in sync with the common human desires, ambitions, and struggles. The traditional Marxist critics located all forms of culture within the context of economics, politics, and history, and treat all forms of art as vehicles for ideological dissemination. They defined ideology as a set of beliefs, opinions, or cultural practices through which we perceive and understand the world around us. In a stratified society, the ideologies of the dominant sect are considered to be the norm, as they, being in majority, acquire the power to control various mediums through which knowledge is disseminated. Thus, they suggested that, I quote, cultural artifacts represent the world around in certain ways so that we obtain particular meanings from them, unquote. Cinema, a significant mode of cultural artifact, plays a vital role in presenting the real or real by translating such human evolution across temporal, spatial, and cultural borders through audiovisual modes. This paper aims to investigate one such interpretations of the images on celluloid that underscore manifestations of socio-cultural ideologies articulated through representations controlled by a domineering class and institutions. With changing times and perception of audience, even cinema has transcended from stereotypical and biased forms to more realistic adaptations and critical underpinnings while dealing with sensitive issues such as of caste, class, and gender, to name a few. Primarily, this paper will deal with how those at margins are now moving to the center by constructing identities centering around significant discourses along political borders besides social framework. So we are first looking at Bhim. Bhim, through its title as well as the narrative, echoes the ideology of Ambedkar, the anti-caste intellectual and leader of the oppressed classes, for whom this was a contemptible system, I quote. Just like a tower which has many stories without a ladder on an entrance, one who is born in the lower story cannot enter the upper story, however worthy he may be. One was to die in the story he was born, unquote. Scholars have discussed how invariable the most common marginalization of these people is at the political level, where they are forgotten and make an invisible presence, like Ralph Ellison's The Invisible Man, whose identity is best construed only when contextualized and understood within the theoretical framework of the self and other binary. Akin to this understanding, the study draws its base from looking at the question of how not only the untouchables, but also the well-crafted stories of their marginalization remain untouched by the mainstream cinema. Rather than noticing the obvious negligence, it shrouded the caste issue by creating class binaries to subside need of representing the real. But Bhim is a deviation from the hegemonic structure of oppression of the Brahmin Dalit binary and fuels new life to the mold of the caste issue by laying bare the failures of the corrupt system from roots to the top. It opens the discussion in the opening scene where a police officer on duty is seen lining up prisoners for transporting to unknown areas after questioning their caste. Which people are you? Kaun se log ho tum? Implying that they are expected to identify themselves with a caste, depending on which different treatment will be meted out towards untouchables. The latter soon becoming the soft target of the brutal law and order that blindly stamps these low caste people as useless creatures, mocking the cliche, Kanun Andha hai. And from here on, the stage is all set for the next 164 minutes of real life events from the lives of Irula tribe in Tamil Nadu, transcribed on screen by the director, who leaves no stone unturned in depicting the discrimination and bias endured by these oppressed and marginalized group of people. The movie initiates the discourse on the values of and beliefs in the legal system of a democratic country that claims fundamental rights for every citizen, but nevertheless, sometimes fails to deliver even an honest framework of jurisdiction. It is the state apparatus, according to Louis Althusser, which eventually leaves an individual instrumentally paralyzed and handicapped at the mercy of the crutches of a legal system that is already diseased due to the trained minds who are also perpetrators of this oppressive and discriminating system. With no voice, these are communities that are born with inherent acceptance to otherization and humiliation, adding to the gut wrenching experiences that define their existence in the society. In the opening scene, when they are labeled as objects on the ground of their caste, a police officer on duty inquires about their crime, to which another police officer, by replying, hits the core truth of their existential worth in the nation which has completed 50 years of independence. And the answers, I quote, their crime is that they are born. इनकी गलती ये है कि ये इस दुनिया में पैदा हुए. The movie shakes the audience by mocking the system that brutally denies even basic fundamental rights to these people who are considered ineligible and non-qualified for the voting and literacy rights due to their backward caste. It is so ironical that they are asked to submit their Pehchan Patra or Jati Praman Patra by the officers at the voter office, knowing very well that they are treated as orphans by their own system in their own state. Forget about any knowledge of writing or even being aware of what a Pehchan Patra or a Jati Praman Patra is. The movie is the story of Sangami, a pregnant tribal woman whose husband Rajakarna is suspected of theft by the police only because he is an easy target to be accused on the grounds of his caste. She is beaten, abused, thrown in the vehicle and then in the cell like an animal, where she, along with the other members of her community and family, beaten to death till they admit, confess, or reveal what the officer desires to hear. Not stopping here, Rajakarna's sister is also sexually assaulted and beaten in a half-naked state, just serving as a bait to capture the hunt by the hunter. The irony is that Rajakarna is called by the Sarpanch because he is a snake catcher to catch the snake in his house, allowed to roam, enter, search every corner of his house, nook and corner of his house. But when his wife comes, weeping and begging for mercy, she is not even allowed to step on the threshold of that house where his husband was once invited and called to catch the snake to save the lives of the people. The caste system is not merely a division of labor, I quote, it is also a division of laborers, unquote. These people who call themselves as Dalits or untouchables, they belong to a group of workers who performed work that was considered to spiritually contaminate the upper caste people, thus dehumanizing them as evil, pagan, animals, and criminals, leading to erasure of their existence, yet not existing. Jai Bhim lays bare the book of law to articulate Dalit resistance or response to the caste-based atrocities, and therefore they are given a voice to the character of Advocate N. Chandru, for whom, I quote, law is the only weapon to protect such depressed classes, who then decides, I quote, to cross all limits beyond the courtroom to join hands with these silenced guards, unquote. Raising public consciousness to clean the dust of the conscience of the society and system becomes the main motto of this courtroom narrative. A courageous and fearless advocate, he raises his voice for the freedom of these tribals as the voice of these voiceless people. He believes it is in the power of law under the constitutional rights. I quote, law is a very powerful weapon that can either slay or protect. Gives him a conscience and respect for law and order, and he becomes a responsible citizen to protect the individual rights irrespective of all discrimination. He outrightly brings in the caste question by questioning the invisibility of Ambedkar, reckoning the significance of his ideology, and the presence of Gandhi and Nehru too by questioning their dominating ideology of the caste hegemony. He says, I quote, Gandhi and Nehru are seen by everyone, but why can't we see Ambedkar? Gandhi और Nehru सबको दिखाई देते हैं, Ambedkar क्यों नहीं दिखाई देते? His fight is against the issue of untouchability with the support of Ambedkar's ideology to abolish. Navigating through the facts and findings of the case of Rajakarna, he is able to prove that his death was a case of murder in lockup, the result of the heinous attempt by the police to force him to accept theft charges as an effortless job for the police to clear off the case since he was born in the lower caste, and Rajakarna could be easily certified as a criminal and useless creature only because he was born in his caste or in a ruler tribe. Sangani rightly says when she questions the IG, who will be bothered if we die? No one will question anyone on our death since we are only numbers, not humans. Unquote. हमारी मौत पे कौन पूछेगा साहब? किसे फर्क पड़ेगा? हम तो सिर्फ संख्या हैं, इंसान नहीं हैं. Although the public prosecutor makes a hilarious remark in the end to save the waning respect of the police department, I quote, all are equal in the eyes of the law. कानून की नज़र में सब बराबर हैं साहब. Embodying the hypocritical attempt of inclusivity and diversity. Yet, there are multiple instances when educated people from the system, like Secretary to IG, Natarajan, outcasts them by addressing them by their caste or jati. It is Chandru who then educates a civil servant and a responsible IAS officer that, I quote, by being born in a particular caste does not prove anyone's criminality. If Jai Bhim is the voice of an awakened untouchable, empowered by constitutional and legal rights, Anubhav Sinha directed Article 15 is an attempt to unveil the real face of the so-called, I quote, Kanun ke Rakhwale, who become a perfect embodiment of, in this movie, I quote, power ke Rakhwale. So now I invite my co-author, Dr. Ankita Chaturvedi, to take on.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Ankita Choudhary. And I hope I'm audible and visible. Okay, all right, sir. So I will be discussing Dalit issues in Anubhav Sinha's 2019 directorial venture, Article 15. And the film is named on the Article 15 of Constitution of India. And I would like to start with what this Article 15 of the Constitution states. It says, no discrimination by the state against any citizen on grounds of caste, religion, sex, race, and place of birth. Now, what does that mean? It means that Constitution of India believes in equality. Now, I'm sure that everyone present here might be aware of this article, if not the movie. But when we look at Sinha's film, then one of the first opening dialogues is कि हमारे अंधेरे से आपका महल और भी चमक रहा है, which means the darkness in our house is adding to the brightness of your palace. Nothing in this dialogue suggests equality, but explains clearly that for the sake of the upliftment of one, someone has to be at a lower place. The dialogues foreshadow the quagmire of caste hierarchy that exists in Indian society. The scene itself is a conspicuous reflection of discrimination that distinguishes lower caste from upper caste. In this film, Ayushmann Khurrana is playing the role of Ayan Ranjan, a Brahmin IPS officer, and his first posting is in Lalgaon, a rural village in Uttar Pradesh. Now, Anubhav Sinha is playing really smart here by keeping this character of the IPS officer a fresh recruit. It is Ayan's very first posting in the rural village. He was earlier in Europe before competing for the IPS, so he does not know much about the caste system or religion, hierarchy, investigations, and as he had no such experiences, personal or professional, he was voided of any sort of preconceived notions, although he has studied the Constitution of India. Now, the main plot of the film revolves around a gang rape and murder case of minor Dalit girls in Lalgaon, Uttar Pradesh. Two of these girls, Shanu and Mamta, they were found hanging dead on a tree, whereas the third girl, Pooja, was missing. Now, these girls were missing for a couple of days, but not a single police officer was concerned about it, and they didn't even bother to file a complaint. But when Ayan questions about these missing girls, he found how uninterested his team seems in this case. And his team officers even tried to educate him about the caste divisions, hierarchy, subdivisions, and all. And now, according to Article 15 of the Constitution, fundamental rights are provided to every citizen of the country without any discrimination. But this particular scene in the movie where the team members are trying to educate Ayan about the caste system, it is a pure example of how much discrimination is rooted into our society, where police officers who are the supposed protectors of the constitution and maintain law and order, appear exploiting it openly without even realizing it. Like Jadavji, he is a local constable and a Dalit also. He is the first person in the movie to be casteist about this missing girl's family, and he says, इनके यहाँ ऐसा ही होता है, ये लोग ऐसे ही होते हैं, which means these people are like this only. So Ayan, whose ideals are unsullied by ground realities, is filled with rage to see the atrocities inflicted on Dalits. And on seeing a police constable addressing Dalits in a suppressing manner, he furiously asks that, who are these people? Are they from Jupiter? Who are these people who just go away? Yes, sir.
Ankita, you have 5 more minutes.
Sure, sir. Sure, sir. And says that, who are these people who just go away and look like they will come back and then then hang themselves from the tree? So although the protagonist Ayan looks extremely infuriated, the conversation clears the opinion of Jatavji more. So it reflects how carefree and unbothered a police department can be towards Dalits. So they did not find the case serious even if the girls were missing of days and later 2 of them were found dead. So these constitutional provisions are the legal safeguard for the welfare of the state, nation and its people. And the paramount purpose of these provisions is to protect civil rights and eliminate social, political and economic discrepancies. But in one scene, it was a function going on and Jatavji, again this Dalit local constable, is seen withdrawing a plate of starters so that he does not have to share it with one of the senior police officers from upper caste. So this scene depicts how socially sanctioned caste oppression has penetrated and is prevalent in government offices. And the scene in some way mocked the Indian constitution that has succeeded in uplifting social mobility, but caste mobility is still under threat. So I would like to give one real-life example of Kiruba Munuswamy. She is a Supreme Court lawyer and Dalits' right activist. She mentioned that how one of the judges from Madras High Court commented on her hairstyle that he was attracting her open hairstyle attracting him more than her arguments. This lady was also later fired at this advocate's office for taking a day off for severe menstrual pain, which is again against law that no office can fire a lady if she is on menstrual cycle. So these are some of the real life experiences that reflect the monopoly of the oppressor castes, and it is to the extent that when Dalit girl asked for a hike of 3 rupees in their daily wages, they were slapped, raped and murdered, and their bodies were hanging on a tree in Badan district. And this is a real life incident that Sinha has highlighted in this movie, Article 15. So, okay, I will conclude now that in this movie, the Brahmin race of the movie also brings forth the pseudo-protectors of society in name of religious unity. The Mahant of the villages uses the slogan Brahman Dalit Ekta or unity to win the election, but in the next scene, some Dalit men were beaten bareback on the street by the constables because they were suspected of trying to enter the temple and eat there. But to get Dalit votes, this Mahanji is all fine to share his food with Dalits, Dalit leader, and broadcast it on the news channels. So this also puts a concept of untouchability into question, that they say we do not drink or eat from their hands, even their shadows are like a curse. But if it was so, then a Dalit girl would be the luckiest. But it is certainly not the case, because the rape case of Dalit girls, and again this Mahanji who's punishing these Dalits for eating inside the temple, but asking for the votes during election and even promoting Brahmin Dalit unity. So this concept of untouchability is nothing but just a farce, a strategy which upper caste uses according to their convenience and benefit, and moreover to suppress the suppressed and marginalize the marginalized. So both the movies, through their exclusive representation, sir, I will hardly take 1 minute. Both the movies, through their exclusive representation of caste in cinema, have chosen real-life incidents to reinforce the similar ideology through their anti-caste discourse and offer a socio-cultural criticism by removing hurdles to the presence of Dalits and the underrepresented trying to enter the audiovisual space. And both the narratives have also underscored how the so-called discourse on subalternity can be subverted if the power equation between the law and oppressed is stabilized through an awareness of constitutional rights. Therefore, These films dramatize the mainstream community's perception towards issues contested in phantasmagorical society, the bearer of horrid realities of brutalized existence. Thank you so much. That was our paper. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ankita. That was perfectly timed. So, Smitana and Vinay, can I invite you both to make your presentation?
Yes, thank you, Karthik. Thanks to the panel. So I will start. We've also chopped out a little bit from the original paper to keep up with the time. So Vinay, am I reading the whole thing, or would you be able to? Okay, perfect. So our paper is called Dalit Citizenship Through Indian Films. Debates around citizenship in India received a renewed vigor with the contentious amendments to the citizenship legislation in 2019, also known as the Citizenship Amendment Act (CA), as well as the updating of the NRC, the National Register of Citizens in Assam. Seen in the context of modernity and modern nation states, citizenship remains concerned with the organization of political life and legal membership of individuals to a state. Over time, while underscoring the legal status of a person, citizenship is also now iterated through a framework of individual rights and duties vis-a-vis a state, and how individuals experience the state from their social political loci in the political community itself. Now, at the same time, the citizen and the outsider is not one of a simple binary or an opposition, such as the us versus them that is usually used, which manifests in a form of exclusion. Rather, as Roy argues, this relationship may be seen as one of foreclusion, where the outsider is present discursively and constitutively in delineations of citizenship. So basically what Roy is trying to say through foreclusion is that despite being a constant referent in the construction of the citizen, outsiders are never able to claim themselves as fully one. Roy's framing of foreclusion, reproduced continuously through juridico-legal pronouncements, is a pertinent point of reference for this paper. But we seek to extend this concept further to its affective dimensions, to understand how caste oppression and structures of caste undermine citizenship. Affective citizenship enables us to foreground the fact, and I quote, while two individuals may be equal citizens from a legal point of view, their perceived difference in terms of religion, race, sex, gender, or class, and caste in this particular paper's context, may result in identifying one individual as the proper true citizen who is naturally entitled to the privileges and status of citizenship, whereas the other may be identified as a quasi or a technical citizen whose belonging to the political community remains in question despite holding an official citizenship. In this view, therefore, citizenship is seen beyond simply as a legal rational exercise of state authority and encompasses other sort of dimensions determining the rightful belonging to a political community or a nation state. And these other dimensions basically include an affective disposition towards the feeling, the correct kind of feeling for the state, nation, or a political community itself. Now, the affective aspects of this internal foreclusion, and I use internal foreclusion to mean within the internal caste logic of the caste society in India, becomes an important framework to posit the emergence of what the paper calls the Dalit citizen. We construct the Dalit citizen in light of the historical and systematic exclusion of Dalits, not only from socio-political and economic opportunities, but also from the moral community itself, a feature that is integral to India's caste order. Literature on citizenship in India reveals that the so-called secular and abstract citizen subject is nonetheless invisibly marked as the upper caste Hindu male. These markers have a normative dimension, in that they inform who the natural citizen is and is the bearer of natural rights, or, for example, has the right to have rights, as Hannah Arendt would say. The Dalit citizen is a hyphenated category that we propose in this paper, And it recognizes the particular embodied and affective experience of citizens at the receiving end of caste oppression and structural and epistemological erasure. We believe this category at once particularizes the citizenship experience of Dalit communities in India, while it also embodies universal ideas of equality, fraternity, and dignity. Now, in this normative field of citizenship, the unprecedented emergence of the Dalit protagonist in popular Indian cinema thus may be seen as an act of citizenship itself. Is it a Nielsen conceptualized acts of citizenship to go beyond the legal and substantial reading of citizenship, and they imagine it in an alternative way, and I quote, as collective or individual deeds that rupture social and historical patterns. Thereby, enacting citizenship in this manner is more than what constitutes merely as practices of citizenship, as understood as rights and obligations of citizens in the form of voting, etc., following the law of land, etc. And so enacting citizenship in that sense are acts that break with the habitus itself. In other words, through these acts of citizenship, the Dalit citizen makes central the claim that their right to have rights is in fact due. So now I will go ahead and discuss two films, a Tamil film called Kaala and a Marathi film Fandri, to give us to explain how the category Dalit citizen is constructed and how the acts of citizenship unfolds in these films. The film Kaala is about Karikalan's story of asserting his legal right to live, own land, and occupy it for himself, and making sure Tamil Dalit migrants like himself in Dharavi, in Mumbai, also have these rights. Kaala was addressed to be the king of Dharavi by one of his haters in a fight, but he embodies a leader over a sort of a dictatorial king. His son is also actively and legally fighting and opposing this development project that is trying to displace these Tamil migrants and occupy their land in the heart of Mumbai. Kaala is fighting Haridev Abhyankar or Haridada. This is the upper caste antagonist, a local upper caste politician, as the latter illegally tries to tear into the fabric of this migrant community. Now, the migrant Dalits are citizens who have not been able to exercise any historical agency, in the state. When Kaala, his son, and the community opposes the encroachment project, it's an act of exercising their citizenship and may be seen as breaking the habitus of a casteist social order. The film uses Kaala and Haridada, their clothing, their personality, and screen presence to mark a contrast. One of the contrasts that emerges is the stark difference in the privilege that their caste location offers them and the differential access that they have to state's resources. Kaala, who is often in black, is the metaphorical sort of Ravan and Asuran, the demon in Indian mythology, and often used as an everyday usage for Dalits. The antagonist, Haridada, played by Nana Patekar, is dressed in white and stands the embodiment of caste purity. A grand ambassador for the Ram Rajya, and his campaign slogans also say, "I will make this country clean and pure," in the film. This hoarding is seen hanging around Dharavi. This clean and pure Ram Rajya, of course, offers a graded citizenship to its public based on their caste identity and caste location. In one of the scenes, Haridada visits Kaala in Dharavi in his house, but does not drink the water that is offered to him by Kaala's wife. And this was an act of course, reinforcing caste hierarchy and asserting caste purity. But when he tries to leave Dharavi, Kaala actually tells him that he would not be able to leave without his permission. Exits from the settlement are closed, and Haridada is forced to go seek permission from Kaala. This role reversal in access to public spaces in the form of Kaala's permission thereby becomes an act of challenging the moral forclusion that caste hierarchy presents in our society. Till the rise of anti-caste films by filmmakers such as Ranjith, Mariselvaraj, and Vetturaman in the last one decade of Tamil cinema was actually dominated by stories of caste pride, and Dalit characters were often objects of pity. So these new assertions of identity by Dalit protagonists and Dalit filmmakers may thus be seen as rupturing the caste habitus that dictates social relations and even the field of arts and aesthetics as well. Now I move on to the second film. So this is Nagraj Manjure's Marathi film Fandri, which came out in 2013. It follows the life of Jabya, a Dalit adolescent and his pursuit of love and dignity in rural Maharashtra. The film exposes the spatial, material, and symbolic inequalities and violence of caste and its devastating, dehumanizing effects on the most oppressed communities in India. At the same time, it conveys these complex affectations through Jabya's eyes and not an upper-caste character's eyes, thereby keeping the dignity of the Dalit protagonist and the characters intact. In a social order where love is violently regulated and disciplined, Manjure humanizes Jabya's experience of simultaneous heartbreak and humiliation due to his caste station in a manner mostly unprecedented in Indian cinema. Jabya's refusal to engage in his caste occupation of pig catching and other menial jobs which the upper caste residents of the village see as polluted, despite the intimidation of the dominant caste members of the village, may be seen as a challenge to the caste habitus and hence an enactment of citizenship. At the end of the film, after a long, grueling and publicly humiliating pig chase, Jabya stares at the camera, and the camera basically represents the upper caste members jeering at him at the end of the film, and he throws a rock towards it. Through Jabya's direct eyes at the camera, Manjule has constructed a powerful oppositional gaze, and I'm quoting bell hooks here, which is to look in order to resist the oppressive caste structures that entails the moral foreclosure itself. The rock thrown at the screen was not only an indictment of upper caste characters in the film, but it also indicts the Brahmanical aesthetic of cinema that is dominant in most Indian language cinemas, and its continuous erasure and dehumanization of Dalits, as well as the gaze of the audience. It's a critique of the gaze of the audience, which is shaped by this Brahmanical aesthetic and sensibility. Throwing the rock thereby transforms Jabya into a Dalit citizen, in that he asserts that his right to have rights is in fact due in this nation state. In conclusion, however, we also want to talk about how these films that we discussed, and we discussed two more films in the paper itself, they recreate the relationship between the Dalit male and or his community with the state or their immediate caste world. But we also want to draw attention to what these particular films couldn't do, which we believe that the film Gili Puchi, it's a short story within a Netflix anthology, which manages to do, which is that it radically and creatively ruptures the cinematic habitus even further. Gili Puchi is a film about Bharti Mondol, a Dalit queer woman who experiences different levels of structural violence for her caste, her gender identity, as well as her sexual orientation. She's subjected to caste violence in her queer relationship with a Brahmin woman, Priya Sharma. Unlike a traditional Dalit male hero, Bharati does not let the Brahmin take advantage. She uses this Brahmin woman as an opportunity to step up at a job that otherwise would not let her grow. This is where director Neeraj offers the oppositional gaze as Bharati exercises her act to citizenship as a Dalit queer woman citizen for equal rights at a workplace. Now, this film, we believe, offers a Dalit female subjectivity that intersects with the queer experience. It draws out nuances from an affective experience of citizenship that is otherwise not acknowledged or recognized in mainstream cinema. This film proves that films can look at nuanced experiences and acknowledge the intersectional nature of marginalized identities and further make space for forgotten citizens within even larger categories that we propose to construct, like the Dalit citizen. With this, we end the paper. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Smitana and Vinay, and an extra thanks for finishing it well before time. So the next will be Gayathri. Gayathri, the floor is yours. Dalit feminism in Mollywood, please. You're muted yourself.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. So my paper is titled as Theorizing Dalit Feminism in Mollywood, Questioning Casteist Progressive Ideology Propagated by the Mainstream Feminist Cinema. Pardon, sir, am I audible? Okay, thank you, sir. Ever since the dismissal of P.K. Rosie, the first Dalit heroine of Malayalam film industry from the history, cinema has been exclusively reserved for deliberate discussion of mainstream feminism. Contemporary commercial films such as How Old Are You, Gaddama, Udaharanam Sujata, which means Sujata an example, etc. portray strong and determined women in Kerala society. However, these stereotypical feminist movies fail to reflect the undercurrents of casteism. This problematic representation leads to universalization of Malayali female subjectivity. Marketing of these biased feminist ideologies is instrumental in propagating the state's developmental discourses to reduce gender gap. While glorifying the image of casteist modern Keralite women who is independent and self-determined and their plight, Brahminization of modern ideal Malayali woman devaluates the identity of Dalit women. Besides being represented as dark-skinned and voiceless victims of upper caste patriarchy in the mainstream movies, these supposedly progressive films also deny any sort of agency for the politically marginalized women to represent themselves in the public sphere. The deliberate discussion of the challenges faced by upper caste middle class women and their plight in Kerala society brilliantly ignore the representation of Dalit womanhood as significant. Moreover, upper caste patriarchy is screened as confined within the spaces of upper caste households or concerning upper caste women only. The upper caste patriarchal brutalities towards Dalit women are completely invisible in these women-centered movies. Dalit women representations are rare and not presented in a positive light on screen. Even though certain movies include Dalit women characters, they are unrecognizable, incapable, immoral, violent, uneducated, humorous, sexually harassed, and pessimistic characters. Their lack of individuality is even more highlighted as glamorous portrayals of intellectual casteist heroines recur in the narrative. Interestingly, the mainstream Malayalam feminist films never question the patriarchal authority that controls the caste system in India. Numerous macro and micro structures of exclusions of women are normalized by the Brahminical patriarchy in Kerala context. Even the production of the concept of ideal working woman was part of a political ideology to preserve female sexuality from sexual contamination. The idea of ultimate control over female sexuality by any means is explicit in various other Vedic texts and Puranas of Hindu mythology, such as Apastamba Dharma Sutra, Trayambaka's version of Manu's Tripun Dharma, Mahabharata, Ramayana, etc. This responsibility of a women's shoulder to preserve the caste purity implies the issues of untouchability. However, mainstream feminist films fail to address these issues. These films unanimously explore the victimization of upper caste women and their plight. The ignorance of a highly heterosexual society in a diverse country like India is problematic. Furthermore, it reinstates the traditional ideas of womanhood. Kerala's working women follows an interesting ideology that sustains the existing of the Brahminical patriarchy. Feminist ideologies are well marketed in Mollywood nowadays. This trend gained momentum after the successful reception of some women-centered movies that narrate the achievements of independent women. The impact created by the movie How Old Are You, The Great Indian Kitchen, etc. are remarkable. These films thus began to cultivate an ideal independent movement, facing the problems alone in the society. However, it becomes problematic when it creates a cult of upper caste self-sufficient women in contrast to the cliched representations of Dalit women in Mollywood. I quote from Anita Rajendran. Malayalam cinema's constructs of femininity offer interesting insights into economies of gender in contemporary Kerala. Female self-fashioning in films has overwhelmingly centered on a valorizing a normative femininity, defined here as femininity that privileges motherhood and moral upbringing of the Malayali nation through a moral submission to patriarchy. The patriarchy that emphasizes the privileges of caste hierarchy is important here. The ideal female construct produced by the Malayalam movie since its inception established certain identifiable traits. The high caste Naya woman, who is fair and beautiful, occupies this position always. The mainstream feminist films have reinstated their presence once again with some additional peculiarities. These movies present high caste heroines who are more strong and bold in character. Most of them are educated but confined within the spaces of caste geography. Films such as Kismet portray independent Dalit heroine, but her physique matches with the cliche representations of all Dalit female characters who are aesthetically not appealing. Therefore, the representations again reinforce the old ideology followed in the mainstream cinema. Even film-based organizations like Amma Matter rejects the existence of caste system in Keralite society. it is not surprising that PK Rosie got disappeared from the industry forever. Even after her predicament, Mollywood is still reluctant to discuss openly about the issue of caste in films. The ideal construct of hero and heroine of Mollywood can never accommodate the dystopian aesthetic of caste in Kerala society. The film Celluloid that narrates the life story of J.C. Daniel, who is the father of Malayalam film industry, describes the plight of Rosie in an unjust way. Rosie, who was a talented artist of Kakarashi Nadagam, a traditional folk theatre in Kerala, is represented as a submissive, fragile girl chosen by Daniel for his film, as upper caste heroines were not willing to act during that period. Her talents as a heroine have been faded into glorification of the male upper caste hero Daniel. It is to be noted here that the role of Rosie, a Dalit Christian in the movie, is played by an upper caste heroine who is painted black. This also remains another major tendency existing in the Malayalam film industry. Malayalam movie makers are still not confident enough to give opportunities for Dalit girls in the industry. Even the roles of Dalit characters are done by upper caste heroines painted black. It is still a question that why these upper caste heroines can't play Dalit characters without presenting themselves as dark. It is also problematic that Dalits can't portray upper caste characters while upper caste actors can easily do that. There exists the need to create a subaltern voice there. Industry thus creates a fake satisfaction by posing itself as inclusive by including these subaltern characters in certain movies, but ultimately fails to be inclusive in practice as it still discourages the growth of subaltern actors. Even the films that represent subaltern characters are not willing to explicitly talk about the caste issue. Hence, there is always an absence of subaltern resistance in these movies, except for movies like Kammattipadam, Kismet, and Papilio Buddha. The characterizations in these movies are also skeptical, as it follows the popular cliche representations of Dalit population played by non-Dalit actors in these films. Babu Kutti, the director of the film Kismet, approached so many mainstream actors to do the role of the heroine Anita for the film, but they were doubtful about the cast and age of the character. It is to be noted that he approached the mainstream upper caste heroines to play the role. His reluctance to bring a Dalit heroine in the film for playing the character of a Dalit woman is emblematic of industry's approach towards the Dalit actors. The re-establishment of Dalit consciousness has failed again when upper caste actors speak for Dalits. Dalit identity is considered as inferior as they can't speak for themselves. Popular historiography narrating the efforts of upper caste communist leaders in the class struggles against feudalism in Kerala is important. It is the same ideology that is working here in the film industry. Says the director Babu Kutti, I quote, "Our concept of a heroine is fixed. What her caste should be, what her color should be, what her age should be. That shows the attitude of our society and our cinema." Movies such as Neelakuil, which was released in 1956, present the same Dalit heroine by an upper caste actress. Moreover, the movie exhibits a perpetrated victim binary. The heroine, who is a Dalit girl, is portrayed as a victim who falls prey to the society to discriminate her. She is discriminated not only in the name of caste, but people question her morality. The association of morality to one's caste history is important to note here. Unfortunately, she is incapable of defending herself. She never raises voices for herself throughout the film, as like the upper caste woman in the movie Parinayam does. Being a widowed Brahmin woman, the heroine of Parinayam resists the representation through her action and dialogues. She questions the morality of the patriarch who tries to criticize and humiliate her as she gets pregnant after her husband's death. Her strength of character is also exposed when she rejects to accept her lover as he failed to support her when she needed. But Neeli in Neelakuil is intellectually inferior to Unnimaya in Parinayam. Both of them are humiliated in the society for their immoral actions. Interestingly, Unnimaya overcomes the trauma while Neeli is not given any kind of agency to represent her voice. The realistic portrayal of Chengara Samaram in Papilio Buddha by Jayan Cherian is an exceptional movie that explicitly describes the caste oppression in Kerala society. Critiquing the leftist ideology of communist leaders in Kerala and Gandhism that glorified acceptance of Varna system in Indian society, film explores the systematic ways in which government perpetuates caste atrocities in the state. The normalization of caste oppression in a state that claims higher literacy and standard of living is questioned in the film. Unfortunately, the film was not a commercial success, even though it gained critical acclamation. The character of Manjushri strongly brings up the idea of Dalit feminism within the film. However, the film only addresses the upper caste patriarchy while ignoring the patriarchy existing within the community. However, the portrayal of Manjushri is justifiable as her characterization didn't fall into the trap of cliched versions of Dalit female characters presented by the mainstream Malayalam movies. The complete absence of such characters in the mainstream feminist films should be discussed in this context. How Old Are You is another coming-of-age film that questions the domestication of working women. It criticizes the way society treats married women by discouraging their talents. The female lead is a seemingly upper caste middle class working lady, Nirupama Rajiv, who is married and has a daughter. The self-assertive husband and humiliations at the working place frustrates her. The alienation becomes complete when her husband and daughter plan to relocate to Ireland to pursue their career, leaving her alone. However, the isolation in the family provides an opportunity for her to get involved in other activities outside the domestic space. Reviving her old friendships as well as creating new ones, she attains self-satisfaction. She becomes more independent and starts an enterprise that becomes a huge success. Her ideology of terrace farming even welcomed national recognition, and final scene shows Nirubama along with her family is having lunch with the President of India. The President appreciates her achievements and is shown that she has already overcome the societal prejudices of being a domestic wife. The film thus celebrates the revival of identity for the seemingly upper caste new woman, acquiring space within the parameters of state economy in Keralite society. However, the film depicts a Dalit woman who is old and ugly living in a ghetto. She's a maid and creates a friendship with the heroine towards the middle of the story. She introduces Nirupama to a well-reputed family. This encounter leads Nirupama to start her new career. Unfortunately, after this incident, the old woman's character completely disappears from the narrative. Nirupama never thanks her or even visits her. The only importance that the old woman got in the narrative is to play as an agency for the upper caste lady to pursue her career. She doesn't have an identity outside of these parameters. She is also abandoned by her family as the film depicts. But she is incapable of pursuing her dreams as she is uneducated and lacks wisdom. The morality of that character is also questioned as she is shown as persuading Nirubama to do unethical things. The heroine is presented as morally superior to the Dalit woman and advises the old woman in harsh voice. The old woman becomes the ultimate other who needs upper caste woman's advice to reform herself. The film Gadama by Kamal depicts the tragic plight of an upper caste Hindu girl employed in Dubai as a maid. The film extensively talks about the atrocities that the heroine has to face from her mistress while working. The film vehemently criticizes her employers who force her to dress like a Muslim. While it is reinstated in the end that she keeps her identity as a Hindu even after going through the violence in a foreign land. The film celebrates the plight of the upper caste woman overcoming the difficulties in a foreign land. Unfortunately, the film never even includes a Dalit character. It is disappointing that the discrimination and the violence that the Dalit women face in their own homeland is negotiable in Mollywood while criticizing the policies of the foreigners. Films such as Suire, Takeoff, etc. discuss women from different walks of life accomplishing their goals, overcoming the traumas that they have to face. Suire narrates the plight of an acid attack victim, and Takeoff describes the story of an Indian nurse working in Iraq. These films successfully portray the geographies of marginalization that limit the subjectivity of women. It includes discrimination at workplace, abuses at domestic and public spaces, but never attempts to acknowledge caste as a major determinant of identification in Keralite society. Subsequently, these films present the upper caste heroines as both morally and intellectually superior to Dalit women characters. The mainstream feminist ideology marketed in industry ignores the voice of Dalit women. Dalit women feminist ideologies are considered as unimportant in these films. There is also a tendency to create a homogeneous female subject, silencing the voice of dissent. As a result, the Brahminical patriarchy remains unchallenged and continues to control female sexuality. Therefore, these films fail in its central aim to shackle the Brahminical patriarchy as female bodies are still under the control. Hence, these films propagate the ideologies popularized by the caste Hindu religious institutions. Keralite women's psyche is constructed in such a way as to preserve the caste purity and family honor. Statistical evidences also suggest that Kerala is not free from honor killings, and women who violate these stringent controlling measures have to confront violent attacks. It is rather an unfortunate situation for a democratic society that claims to have social welfare as its hallmark of developmental ideology. Commercially, movies are still reluctant to include such narratives attacking the Brahminical patriarchy. They never criticize the basic ideologies that constitute the caste system. Rather, caste is treated as a major capital that benefits both upper caste men and women. The oppression faced by Dalit women in workplaces and domestic spaces are different. They are doubly marginalized for their caste as well as gender identity. While concentrating upon the gender inequality, the mainstream Malayalam movies fail to discuss the importance of Dalit feminism. It also misinterprets mainstream feminism as inclusive and devalues the Dalit female subjectivity. That's the conclusion of my paper, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gayathri. You also finished your paper well in time. So I guess we will have a lot of time for our good and critical discussions now. So Neeraj, please join us. Unmute yourself, please.
Yeah. Hello everyone, I am Neeraj Bunkar from Nottingham Trent University, England, and I would like to thank the organizer for giving me this opportunity to present my work. So my research title is Theorizing Anticaste Movement, a critical analysis of Ranjith's Kaala. So I want to share my screen for the presentation. So can I share the screen, sir? Karthick? Is it visible? Okay. So yes, I want to start. So Kala is not an ordinary story, hence it needed to be told with a different perspective, and that is the Ambedkarite gaze that Paranjit has done. Stories from slum has always been discussed in the cinematic realm, like Slumdog Millionaire, but not through the critical anti-caste lens. The slums where most people from Bahujan backgrounds live, and the kind of brotherhood, sisterhood, celebration, and collective resistance they share is something important that Kala represents. Kala is a film that evokes a sense of community. In a conversation with Jarina, Kaala, the protagonist, says, I will always be selfish about our rights. My people are not lambs to be slaughtered by anybody. This is a indicative of the fact that Dalits have always been used as a tool for political or religious fanatics. But now this is not going to happen in this 21st century because Dalits are no longer uneducated and ignorant of their rights. Blake, perspective from below. Color Blake is shown as a symbol of resistance and an act of revolution. Throughout the film, it appears as the contrast to white color. Buddhist protagonist played by Rajnikant has the name Kaala. Film involves with the darkness in many scenes to represent the essence of Kaala, that Dalits are fighting the casteist forces despite all the adversity. Kala also uses a black colored car, black umbrella, black watch, and black goggles, which depict black as rebellious and Protestant. According to antagonist, Kala means Ravana, a demon king. As he explained to his granddaughter, this is how the narrative of good versus bad, pure versus impure is fabricated in the Indian mind. To this explanation, Kala, in a song and conversation with antagonist, refers himself as a god of death, Yamaraj, and a single-headed Ravana. In this way, he rejects the mythological projection of assertive Dalit by the Swarna people. This is the difference that how what so-called upper caste people intend to label Dalits through their virulent gaze and what Dalits themselves describe their identity beyond the religious narrative as ordinary, confident, and vocal people. For instance, when the antagonist Nana Patakar asked the protagonist, Kala, what sort of a name is this man? It disgusts me when I say it. This black color is ugly to look at, irritates my eyes. Protagonist replies, white is pure and black is impure. Irritates you? Is it? What an ugly thought. The problem is in your perception. Black is the color of the proletariat. He further says, come see in my chawls. Dust scatters into a rainbow, hygiene, clean and pure. These all are your masks. Thus, Kala brings out the perspective from below, which instead of looking at the realities from above, evokes the aesthetics, Dalit anticaste that emerge from below. In this way, it also dismantles the binaries of white as a superior and a black as an inferior. Paranjit also portrays black as a metaphor in many other ways, such as Jarina's daughter is named Kaira, which literally means black in Greek. Blue, a color of Ambedkarite consciousness. Blue color in the film emerged as the alternative discourse to challenge the dominant Hindu caste hegemony. When you see it in the film, especially in the song, you realize it coming out as an Ambedkarite consciousness. For example, two boys in the slide coming out of the crowd in a blue dress with blue color. A crowd here referring to Hindu supremacy. As Christopher argues, the blue color represents the resistance towards injustice from Dalits. The blue flag was introduced by Ambedkar for his party, the Independent Labour Party. Blue has been associated with the Dalits struggle since then. The political parties in the film are the reflection of right-wing Hindutva nationalists versus Ambedkarite parties. The antagonist in the film associated with a party named Nav Bharat Rashtravadi Party, New India Nationalist Party. He depicted as a spiritual nationalist leader. On the other hand, there is a party named Oppressed People Republic Party, which has a flag with a color the color blue and Ashok Chakra. This is a representation of Ambedkarite movement in the political arena. It resembles the parties that Baba Sahib started and envisioned, like Independent Labour Party, Scheduled Caste Federation, and Republic Party of India. The protagonist Kaala appears in a blue shirt when he attends a community meeting and when he is released from the police station where he was held for a night simply because he is vocal for his community rights. He waves his hand with a smile toward the people of his community waiting outside the police station. These nuances pop up in a different elucidation are not mere coincidences but are the hallmarks of an Ambedkarite movement. Space and anti-caste discourse. Depicting Buddha Vihara as a cultural discourse, cultural and ideological space is the reflection of anti-caste struggle as well as reclamation of the identity. It is a counter to the Brahminical hegemony of culture and space. Buddha Vihara serves as a community resource center, and so does the film, where Kaala meets to unite his community and take the movement forward. Buddha, Jyotiba Phule, Ambedkar, and Periyar seems to be narrating their long history of humanity, fraternity, solidarity, harmony, compassion, equality, and justice against the inhuman treatment, hostility, antipathy, and oppression of caste society in different frames. Buddha, be it on the wall of the community or at home, was an inspiration for people like Phule and Ambedkar, who took the fight and fought for the rights of the oppressed classes, and that is why they are depicted with Buddha in the frame. Periyar's appearance on the screen is a historical event in the cinematic world. Periyar, who spent his whole life for the anti-caste movement, sensitizing people for freedom from religious blindness, the depiction of his bust in the film is an assertion in itself. Dalits has a long history associated with the land and how they have been treated by the landholding communities since centuries. The land in the film has been shown as a symbol of domination and power. Film narrates how land always been pivotal to human civilization since centuries, and how the people who occupied huge land used it as a tool to dominate others. It continues even in the independent India. The introduction of Urban Land Ceiling Act 1976 was a big step in providing the land to the urban poor landless, but it failed to fulfill the objectives, which include shelter to the urban poor and improving the land supply effectively. Film states that how land is attached with the notion of social status in the society. It focuses about the urban poor who lives in slums. For rich people, land is a tool to dominate poor, but land for the deprived section is everything. Whatever land they have, no matter how much the size of it, they earned by the hard work. For instance, protagonist says to an antagonist, land is power for you, but to us it means life. Anti-caste assertion. In Indian society, the fight of Dalits with casteist forces is of a different kind, which is continuing for thousands of years. But after the path shown by Phule, Periyar, and Baba Sahib, the direction of this struggle has taken a new turn, especially the constitution given by the Ambedkar to the country, which has emerged as a tool or weapon for the Dalits. One of the ways of protest is to stop the work, which we get to see in the film, when all the workers' society stands together with the people of the slum, which include taxi drivers, sweepers, etc. In this slide, Ambedkarite people are throwing garbage in front of the municipal corporation of Mumbai to register their protest against the government. Like in Gujarat, after the Una incident, people from the Dalit community appealed to the community members to stop the sanitation-related works as a symbol of protest in solidarity with the Dalit victims. In another frame of the slide, Kaala is sitting on the chair in Haridev's home. Haridev, the antagonist, says, "What right do you have to sit in front of me? You must know who you are. I don't like to remind you constantly. Throw your pride aside. Come and apologize to me just to put an end to this." Haridev is proud of his Hindu caste identity and reminding Kaala of his caste location. But Kaala, a confident Ambedkarite with full of attitude, puts his leg on the same table and says, "The distance is the same. Touch my feet. I will decide if I want to punish or forgive you." You might have power, but I have thousands of people as my support, family, and companions. One thing which is worth noting is that Haridev always insists on touching his feet. This practice is rooted in the Hindu tradition, which is followed by Haridev. But on the other hand, Kaala never allows or force anyone to touch his feet, which signifies equality rather than placing someone in a position of dominance. Wealth and power are everything to Haridev, but Kaala is aware of the power he has in terms of community. This is the Ambedkarite way of treating everyone equally. In fact, in the film, Jarina says to Hari, "Give me your hand," and then she shakes hand. This is what we call equality, okay? Not making someone fall at your feet. Killing casteist goons is a tantamount to rejecting God and Hindu mythology. In this slide, we see when Kaala kills Vishnu, Shampatraj, symbolically the Hindu deity. After that scene, we see Ganesha, a Hindu deity, being thrown into the sea and later drowning in the water. The kind of interpretation and linkage that Paranjit depicts
Neeraj,
here.
you have 5 minutes. 5 minutes. 5 minutes.
Okay. In another scene, when Kaala was conversing with Hari in response to Hari's reference to the Mahabharata, Arjuna, and Krishna, Kaala says, "If stealing my land is your dharma and your God's dharma, then I won't spare even your God." This is a clear message from the anti-caste struggle to the Hindu upper caste society. So I will cut it to short and conclude it. Upper caste aesthetic and so in this frame, we see the Bhim flag and the Indian flag in the same frame. Film ends with this frame. It resonates the famous quote by Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, "We are Indian, firstly and lastly." So the last slide I want to say. So upper caste aesthetic versus Dalit aesthetic. For the upper caste people in urban, including corporate companies, land mafia, and politicians, slum ruins the beauty of the city and the identity of people who live there are not as a human being but reduces to a mere criminal. Hence, they should be evicted from the city. Ranjith depicts the contradictory aesthetic of Dalit and upper caste. Dalit who cleans the road, collects all the garbage, and flexes the beauty of the city, but still called as a dirty and unclean. But the people who throw the garbage and responsible for the filthiness are considered as the clean and gentle. As Manju explores anti-caste aesthetic as affects, expression, and celebration beyond the narratives of pain and humiliation, she describes, unlike other popular films which depict only the negative aspect of slum life, Ranjith highlights their life, struggle, and celebration. From the act of naming, this film offers an anti-caste aesthetic that is also an oppositional gaze to mainstream Indian cinema. Kaala depicts the pain, sorrow, and suffering of the migrant Dalit family, but along with this, it provides strong retaliation, community spirit, and family as the backbone of the Dalit movement. Unlike other films, it not only encapsulates the pitiable world of Dalits, but offers Ambedkarite euphony as a solution. Hence, Kaala is a combination of what the world is and how it should be, an equal, just, and diverse with fraternity and equality. As Paranjit notes that there have been films in the past that depicts Dalit characters and lives. They were made by non-Dalits who views us through a lens of pity. Our world is shown as colorless and poverty-stricken. Yes, we are economically poor, but not culturally so. Where is the depiction of our vibrant culture, music, and food? Why is our world shown bereft of it? In Kaala, Paranjit explored the world with an Ambedkarite eye, showcasing culture and delicacy in slum homes. He even brought up the debates of Hindi versus Tamil, veg versus non-veg, deliberately introducing a beef soup in the film to discredit the notion of vegetarianism as a way of asserting nationalism. Most of the Dalit characters are labeled as anti-national by portraying them as dacoits, goons, or robbers when fighting against injustice. But here in this film, Kaala, the protagonist is shown as not as an anti-law person, but as an outspoken, full of swag and attitude. He often talks about the law, and he knows how to respect the constitution. Haridev, the antagonist, is a national leader in the film. In many of his political banners, we often see him claiming, "I am a patriot, I will clean this country." But Kaala never claims to be a patriot or a nationalist. Rather, he emerges as a true crusader of social justice, respect diversity in slums, and knows the importance of community spirit. Paranjit not only reverses the mythological understanding of undermining Dalit and Bahujan icons, but also informs a new interpretation of Dravidian culture that reclaims and strengthens the anti-caste struggle. For example, Ravana is a demon and an evil person in Hindu mythology, and Rama is a deity who was born to kill Ravana for good and prosperity. But in the film, Kaala kills Harideva, the Rama born to kill Ravana. It will be no exaggeration if I call it a proper Ambedkarite film, which means an anti-caste film. Everything related to the anti-caste struggle has been depicted in this film, be it depiction of Buddha, Phule, Ambedkar, Periyar, or Jai Bhim slogan, Blue Flag, written with Jai Bhim, the importance of education, agitation, and organizing. The boy Bhimji in the film throws a stone on the poster of Haridev, Bhimji, the literal abbreviation of Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, represents the anti-caste movement. In contrast, Haridev signifies the caste society. So, in fact, Bhimji throws stones at the brutal caste system and rejects the dominance of Hindutva rule. A similar connotation is found in Nagaraj Manjule's Pantry when Jabia, the protagonist, throws a stone at the camera, a symbol for the caste society, and the film ends. Thank you.
Thank you, Neeraj. So that was also very properly timed. So I thank all of our speakers for your excellent papers and more importantly for maintaining excellent discipline as well. So we have a good time for discussion, but let me start off with some preliminary remarks. So this is just for all of us to consider, and any of you can answer. And I'll later move on to very specific questions for each speaker. So Dalit cinema, or what is being referred to as Dalit cinema in recent times, has made great ripples in the media, and there has been a lot of debate both in academia and out on the same. That we are seeing a new wave, almost to the equivalent of the French new wave or the German new wave or so on. Right now, we can definitely identify two key figures who were responsible for the popularization of Dalit cinema and for showing that cinema which foregrounds Dalits can be commercially very successful. And these two figures are Ranjith, of course, and Nagaraj Manjule. Both of them have made a remarkable impact in pushing Dalit cinema to a mainstream. And as some of your papers have rightly pointed out, while in the past Dalits were seen as objects of pity or victims to be saved, now you have assertive Dalit protagonists, voicing their own narratives and claiming their own space, and putting forward claims for whether it be recognition or representation or redistribution, to use Nancy Fraser's terms. So you get all of this in the new wave, if you want to call it, of Dalit cinema. But having said that, let us also it would be nice if we were also could wonder why Ranjith and why Nagaraj Manjule, right? And what is it about their location, or what is it about their background that tells more about them and more about the cinema and the manner in which it has made such an impact, right? Because let us say, I mean, this is perhaps something which Gayathri could tell, or maybe I'm not sure if any of the speakers are from Bengal, but Kerala and West Bengal also have a sizable Dalit population. There are states which claim that economic redistribution happened, that the lower classes were empowered. But why is it that there has been no Dalit filmmaker or a prominent Dalit artist from either of these two states, despite progressive forces from both states making such claims? On the other hand, we also know that both Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra have a long history of anti-caste struggle, whether it be the non-Brahmin movement or the Dalit movement, or the point where both the non-Brahmin and the Dalit movements in both these states have come together to wage a common struggle. So, if I could paraphrase Marx in a sort of a apt way for our discussion, men and women make their own films, but they do not make it in the way they like. The personalities and traditions from the past weigh down on the current generation. So this is a famous quote of Marx from the 18 Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, that men make their own history, but they do not make it the way they choose. because the past and traditions greatly influences them. So perhaps there is some effect of the past, some effect of tradition from Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu that has greatly influenced and that has greatly set the stage for filmmakers like Nagaraj Manjule and Pa Ranjith to emerge and perhaps even occupy. Um, so, on that note, since I'm more familiar with Tamil cinema, there is just a little bit of information I would like to share with you, which is that in as much as Ranjit has made a landmark contribution, there has always there has not always, there has already been a history of challenging caste or naming caste or discussing or confronting caste in Tamil cinema. Now, if you look at some of Ranjit's interviews, he often says that he is inspired by the Tamil film Parasakti, right? Now, Parasakti is considered as the finest example of Dravidian cinema, quote unquote, because the scriptwriter for Parasakti, the man, the brain behind Parasakti was the DMK leader Karunanidhi, right? So likewise, there was also this other film by another DMK, the founder of the DMK, CN Annadurai, called Velekari, which also very strongly addresses caste and class issues and confronts them as social evils to be fought. So, and also there have been films of which star, very prominent actors like M.R. Radha, MGR, Chandrababu, who have all challenged caste. Maybe not so explicitly in the manner which Ranjit does, but they have done it. So this history has been there in Tamil cinema since the 1950s. And in fact, in one of the movies, MGR, who's probably the most popular actor of Tamil actor of all time, who was who was consecutively elected as chief minister for 3 terms till he passed away in power. In one film called Madurai Veeran, I think, he plays the role of an Dalit character, because this Madurai Veeran is supposed to be a Dalit folk god, right? So you already have this sort of a tradition of popular heroes playing subaltern roles, right? And not just subaltern class roles like Amitabh Bachchan, playing what's that very famous role, Vijay Deenanath Chauhan, right? So I assume Chauhan is a landowning community which claims to upper caste and warrior status, but he plays the role of a subaltern angry male, right? Where his class is highlighted, but his caste is somehow not just invisibilized, but also that element of anger, the element of outrage is attributed to his caste, his inheriting the caste status as well. On the other hand, you had Tamil heroes in, very popular Tamil heroes, whether it be MGR or Sivaji Ganesan or Kamal Haasan or Rajinikanth, who took on the roles of subaltern caste characters, not just in class but caste as well. So you had this sort of a tradition already existing. So these are perhaps things for us to deliberate upon on how this sort of a history proves conducive for more radical films to emerge in the present and what directions it can go in the future. Now, having said that, there's also a general problem which I guess we should probably consider, is that when we talk about caste in cinema, right, at least in popular academic or media debates, why is it that we either look at caste in cinema when there is, a clear assertion of chest thumping caste supremacy, that is one, or other, a clear assertion of Dalit presence or resistance. So why is caste cinema attributed to only to these two extremes? Now, to be a sort of a devil's advocate, how do we look at the films? And I'll take two extreme examples here of Satyajit Ray and Karan Johar, right? So when we talk about caste in cinema, we never think of these two. Usually, we don't think of Satyajit Ray or Karan Johar, where caste is supposedly not there, but it is actually very much there, right? So, I mean, of course, there is absolutely no comparison between a genius like Ray and Johar, but and also I would also say that the Apu trilogy is perhaps one of the very best films made. But my God, this narrative of this poor suffering Brahmin, is a very powerful narrative which exists throughout the motif of the film, even if Ray himself might not have wanted to posit such a narrative. So why is it that when we talk of caste in cinema, these sort of supposedly neutral or broader films are not brought into the picture? Okay. Now, having said that, I also want to ask another sort of a counter question: is that can we imagine either of these two directors, Karan Johar or Satyajit Ray, or the people who follow them and imitate them, making anti-caste cinema? Or is it even necessary that we should expect it from them? That is, should we expect all directors or directors who claim to be socially conscious or aesthetically conscious to address caste in their films? So that's just a sort of a question for you to consider. And my other point is that are Dalits the only caste group who are erased or negatively portrayed in cinema? Right? How do we look at the representation or misrepresentation or the complete absence of representation of the denotified communities, the ex-criminal tribes, and the hundreds of backward castes which exist in India? Now, I am when I'm talking about this, I was just reminded. I mean, the last Indian TV series I saw was Patal Lok a few years back, right? Now, in Patal Lok, there is a sort of a very stereotypical and almost, I would say, a criminalized portrayal of the Gurjar community, who are a former criminal tribe, right? So now the Gurjars, as some of you would know, were a tribe who were considered as criminal, and they were, subject to extreme sort of legal hassles under the colonial regime. And in a sense, Patal Lok seems to suggest or imply that being criminal or criminality is actually an essence of their caste nature, right? Unfortunately, there was no criticism from the progressive camp about this portrayal, and it was left to a MLA or MP from the BJP to condemn this. Right. So, what do we look? How do we look at this? Okay. Now, okay, and finally, the one other general point which I want to make is also that we should not at times overestimate the impact of mass culture, right? So my little bit of reading in Theodore Adorno makes me a bit skeptical whenever I see the success of progressive movies being celebrated as a sort of a precursor to some sort of a revolutionary moment, right? So if films like Battleship Potemkin of Sergei Eisenstein, or even our local example, Parasakti of Karnanidhi, if they succeeded, it was not because these movies made an impact on the movement, but rather because the movement made an impact on these movies. So there was some other mass, upsurge building up, which got represented in the mass culture. I don't think it was the other way around, that the mass culture got diffused into a mass movement. So perhaps that is something which we could also probably think about. So, okay, now I'll go into very specific questions to each of the speakers. And thank you guys again. Really enjoyed all of your papers, right? So, Sucharita and Ankita, following from my point about, whether Dalits are the only community who are misrepresented or not represented, I think it's very interesting that you brought Bhim and Article 15, because both films emphasize on constitutional methods of getting justice, right? So there is a sort of open faith that constitutional battles, right, even if it might be a hard fraught struggle that you have to fight against a mountain of prejudices and institutional hurdles, that there is a possibility of justice within the framework of the legal system and within the framework of the constitution, right? So how do you place this in relation with the other, let's say, more militant or the more confrontationist sort of films or narratives? That's something I wanted to know. And also, the thing is, see, Bhim, I would say, was very important in a sense, because it, differently, it highlighted the travails of a scheduled tribe community, right? Now, in Tamil cinema as such, you have seen portrayals of the elite upper caste, the Brahmins, and the other non-Brahmin elite upper caste. You have seen portrayals of the numerically dominant intermediate caste, who are some 3-4 communities. And then you have seen portrayals of Dalits, either, as victims, or more recently as assertive militant protagonists. But the tribals have usually been caricatured, completely caricatured, and Bhim, to some extent, I would say, for the first time portrayed this particular tribe community on cinema, and the sort of what shall I say, historical, the injustices which they face. But is it right to put it in a sort of a narrative of Dalit cinema, or is it something else which we should probably look at, right? Because though the slogan as such is Jai Bhim, how do we look at it? Can we in all authenticity connect it to the sort of Dalit cinema that the other papers have been talking about? So, to Smitana and Vinay, from your paper, I just wanted to ask you if you think that Karnan is a Dalit film, right? So, why I ask this is because, as you rightly point out in your paper, Karnan foregrounds the Mallar community, who are also alternatively known as Pallars, and in recent times they have fought to get themselves renamed as Devendra Kula Vellalars, which is the landlords or landowning community, or the agriculturalists who descend from the line of the Lord Indra, right? So, and also many of the prominent Mallar or Devendra Kula Vellalar leaders, whatever you might want to call them, very vehemently reject the identity of Dalit being cast upon their community. Some of them have even threatened filing legal cases if anyone refers to this community as Dalit. Now, what is interesting is about the consumption of Karna, right? At one point, you have certain, commentators or reviewers in the English media who celebrate it as a Dalit film, while at a local Tamil level, or at, in the realm of political society, if we want to use Partha Chatterjee's term, it is seen not as an anti-caste film, but as a film which asserts Devendra presence, right? That shows them also as a community which is able to, have a dominating presence in public space, right? So they don't necessarily, in the sort of local narrative, they don't view it necessarily as a Dalit struggle against state injustice. Rather, they view it as, I was reading this recent book by Thomas Bloom Hansen called The Law of Force, right? So they view it as the exercise of their law of force to put a check to the force of law, right? So can that really fit within a Dalit film or Dalit cinema narrative? Okay. And one other point which you made in your paper about caste pride in Tamil cinema, I would say that this also has a sort of a time period, right? So it begins in the sort of early 90s, this explicit display of caste pride, but that's also very specific to certain intermediate castes, right? At the most two or three, I would say, um, mainly because these were agrarian communities, and in the early 90s, with the opening up of the neoliberal regime, there was a sort of an acute crisis which was felt, and there was also a sort of a reactive need to assert their tradition and their rootedness. So that's perhaps for you to consider later when you expand on this paper. But having said that, in the 90s, there were also other films which challenged casteism, right, in Tamil cinema. So, for instance, there was this film called Iranian, on which I've written a little essay in All About Ambedkar, the journal which Maitosh edits. You could probably check it out. And there was also another film called Kovilpatti Veeralakshmi, right? Which actually might, if that film were released today, it might have been celebrated as a Dalit feminist film, right? Because in that film, the protagonist is a woman Dalit militant, and it is she who literally chases the policemen who come to, sexually harass her and, literally hunts them down, right? So if you come to think of it in retrospective effect, it was in a sense more radical than Karnan, right? So these films were being taken at that time, but the difference, however, is that they were not as commercially successful as the films of Ranjith or Mari Selvaraj were. So something has happened from that time period to this now. So that is some social change which we should probably look at. Okay. Gayathri's paper is there is a very important question of whether a non-Dalit can play a Dalit. I think this is this is some sort of a question which I guess is being would be debated around. It's very common in debates around representation the world's over, right? Representation the world over. So whether a person who does not have the experience of a particular identity, can they actually portray it, right? But on that, I just want to ask you, as again, as a sort of a provocative question, that Mammootty, who's probably one of the most famous stars, superstars from Kerala, he played Dr. Ambedkar, right? And at least after viewing his performance, I'm not sure if there is any other actor in India who can do such a wonderful job. I'm sure there might be, but I'm not sure. But having said that, he also recently played the role of a casteist Brahmin in this film called Pulu, right? Which I recently saw, and I thought it was a particularly interesting film, though it was a bit here and there. Is this really necessary? Is my question, that whether a Dalit character is necessary to play a Dalit role. Because if that were the case, now this point will connect to the point which other two papers on Kaala have, made, because Kaala does not star as a Dalit character. Right? Rajinikanth is not a Dalit. And in fact, to the best of my knowledge, none of the protagonists in Ranjith's films are Dalits. Right? Be it Sarpata Parambarai, be it Madras, be it Kabali, be it Kaala, I don't think the person starring in his next film is also Dalit. Right? So is that something necessary? And can we can we really push this argument forward? Or is there some way to address this in a sort of a different way, that you should have a sort of a perhaps a different portrayal of Dalits from the manner in which Malayalam cinema is showing at the moment, or is it also necessary that a person embodying that experience should be the person to portray the character? Okay. And finally, Neeraj, so on your paper on Kaala, I just also wanted to ask you, is that, see, Haridev Abhyankar is not just a Hindu nationalist figure, he is also a Chitpavan Brahmin, right? Because Abhyankar is a common, again to the best of my knowledge, is a common Chitpavan Brahmin surname. And something which is also very significant about this is that it, in that sort of trajectory of casteist villains in South Indian cinema particularly, people have been very careful about not showing Brahmins as villains, or even if they show Brahmins as villains, they don't physically harm them. Somewhere the mentality of Brahmahatya, that you'll be cursed for life if you harm a Brahmin, is there in the minds of filmmakers, I would say. So in a sense, you could say that Ranjith is also symbolically breaking that, right? That not only is he showing a Brahmin as a villain, he shows him being lynched by a sort of a subaltern mob. But I just wanted to ask you if you see any sort of a continuity between Kabali, in case you have seen it, right? Do you see any sort of a continuity between Kabali and Kaala, or do you see any sort of a disjunct or an evolution, or whatever you might want to call it over there? And just one other point I wanted to raise is that that the Constable Shivaji Gaikwad, right? So you make a reference to Chhatrapati Shivaji, right? That it's a reference to Chhatrapati Shivaji. Actually, it is not. It is a reference to Rajinikanth only. Rajinikanth's real name is Shivaji Gaikwad. So yeah, and in case you are interested, there is a volume called Tamil Cinema in the 21st Century. It has a chapter of mine on Kabali and Kaala. So if you're interested, you could have a look at it. So I leave the floor open for your discussion. So who shall we start with?
If you allow, sir, we would like to start and...
Sure, Sucharita, please.
Yeah, so I hope I am audible and visible.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So first, I'll thank you, sir, for the valuable feedback. And this is what I also discussed with my co-author, who was my scholar also, Dr. Ankita Choudhary, that after sending the abstract while we were working on the paper, this was one of the question that I raised to her. And Ankita, how would we justify why are we looking at the representation of Dalits in Jai Bhim? Because the movie is about Irula tribe. Of course, it is based on a real life event, but the movie is about a tribe. So we can't just restrict it to this word, to this representation of a particular word. So we researched and we thought if we could defend it, we would say that the word that was coined, according to our understanding, by Jyotira Phule, how it encompassed all those people who belong to these scheduled tribes and castes and backward castes. So that was our concern, but to be very honest, we couldn't change the abstract or revise the abstract. So we thought if we are questioned, and we were ready for this, sir. I was ready for this. I said we will definitely have this question by the chairperson, so we should think about it. So this is how, this is, you can say, a simple attempt to defend why we took Jai Bhim. And Secondly, I think I would like to go to the questions that have been there for us. I think there are two questions, one on Article 15 and one on...
We'll come to that after, we have finished.
Okay, sir. Okay.
I'll read it out for you. Yeah.
Okay, definitely.
Yeah. So does anyone else want to respond to my comments? Yeah.
Hi, Karthik. Thank you so much for your comments. I must admit, I am not the cinema expert. It is Vinay. So I may not be able to address your questions related to Tamil cinema directly, but I take all your, all the comments make absolute sense, particularly even the earlier general comment that you made about not to kind of overestimate the power of cinema and to also contextualize it in the changing social dynamics. So I'd be actually very interested, as somebody who studies political science, would be very interested to look at what changed, like you said, in Tamil society between this kind of cinema with central themes like caste pride of intermediate castes versus is it a newly emerging Dalit middle class? Because we see Dalit filmmakers coming out, right? Both in Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu. So I'd be very interested. And why now and why not say earlier? Such a sort of a comparative would be, I think, an excellent sort of paper, and I'm already kind of excited to think about that. Regarding Karnan, yes, we had a similar situation as our previous speaker said. Once we wrote the paper, we also had this understanding that this may not very well qualify as a film, as a Dalit film, I think, or an anti-caste film rather. I think we were primarily looking at the aesthetic, so to speak, and not so much the content itself. So I think that point could have been made more nuanced. I think we missed that. So yeah. So thank you for pointing it out. I think it's important one. I'm not sure if there's anything else that you had asked, particularly to our paper.
No, these are just general points. You don't. I mean, you can always come back at a later moment when you respond to anything else. Neeraj and Gayathri, anything from you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir, for the valuable feedback that you gave me. Actually, I was not focusing upon the problem that non-Dalit people are actually representing the Dalit characters. How they are representing, if they are excellently representing those characters, that's up to their talents and all that. I'm not commenting upon that. What's my point is that this kind of representation of Dalit character by the non-Dalit characters, it actually develops an idea that then Dalits are actually unable to represent themselves. So there is a kind of hierarchy that is working there. Only non-Dalit people can represent. They can actually speak for themselves. This is the same thing I think Spivak has already pointed out in her essay. That when the subaltern tries to speak, they no longer become subaltern. So they are not. These industries are not giving them any agency to represent themselves or to raise their voice, because they always wanted to maintain this kind of a hierarchy. That's why still non-Dalit characters are actually representing Dalit people. And at the same time, as you have already mentioned, this economic status and the gender gap statistics, all of this Kerala state is actually showing that, we are actually an inclusive state, and our government has so many welfare policies and all that. But still this kind of a thing exists in Malayalam film industry. And at the same time, it was actually focusing upon mainstream commercial feminist films. These films never even include a Dalit woman character. They always treat Dalit woman characters submissive one, or sometimes sexually harassed victims. It's a kind of perpetrator victim binary that they are already reproducing. Nothing has done that, nothing newer. So that is the thing that I wanted to point out. Why they are not representing these Dalit women? Are they? Do they consider that they are still uneducated? Many of them are already educated. Many of them actually work in several places. So why can't you actually represent those characters in the film? They can also encourage people. So why they didn't become the faces of Kerala feminism at all? Why you are separating Dalit feminists from this mainstream feminism? That was the thing that I wanted to point out to this.
Thank you. Neeraj?
Yes, Karthik, thank you for your insights. I would like to comment on your insight that you have mentioned about the Kabali and Kaala. So yeah, I see the similarities. There is some kind of a continuation in where we see that Kabali is also like a assertive man and assertive. He fight for his community. In this Kaala also the same thing. So there are the many kind of similarities like that. So I feel it is another kind of a continuation of Kabali. And for your like the insight about the Shivaji Gaikwad, yeah, there is a like it is mentioned about this Rajnikant itself, but there could be another interpretation that I have employed here. So yeah, that's thank you.
Okay, so we'll go to questions from the audience. And how much more time do we have left?
Karthik, we were supposed to end the session at 1:30.
And no, see, my app shows only time. So,
Yeah.
So is it 1:30 already?
Yeah, it's 1:30. Yeah.
So
maybe you can take 5 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, can we take 5 minutes? Okay. So please answer as briefly as possible. Okay. The question, don't you think Article 15 suffers from Savarna saviorism? How can a UPSC guy remain ignorant about caste realities?
Okay, sir. Yes, thank you. And I'll be very specific. First of all, yes, it is not possible for any candidate to clear an exam like UPSC without being aware of caste and their hierarchy, something like that. But as I said that being a Brahmin, you might don't suffer, experience such issues where somebody is ignoring you, isn't it? They have lesser experiences of such problems. So that is why this can be one strategy of casting someone, an IPS officer who is a Brahmin. Second thing, yes, it can be a discussion that why always a Brahmin or a Swarna savior. The thing is, there is a huge gap between this upper and lower caste. And to fill this gap, it's not the responsibility of only a lower caste to make this journey. They both are supposed to make this journey to fill the gap. And for that, and it is not this journey, it is this journey, if we say it. So this Brahmins, they are supposed to lower down their status, some status in the sense that they are the so-called upper people. And these lower castes are supposed to, I'm sorry, are you saying something?
Brief.
Okay.
Yeah.
So to bring it at the equal level. So that is why maybe Sinha is trying to, cast this Brahmin person as this Brahmin IPS officer. Yes.
Okay. So the second question is also for you. Is the excessive violence on the body of the Adivasi in Jai Bhim, does it create a voyeuristic representation of oppression against the Adivasis? Does it, again show the Adivasis as agency-less who require someone from outside to save them?
Sir, I would like to be very brief on this, and first would like to point, I think this is a question from Smitana, if I'm not pronouncing it wrong.
Yeah.
The reason behind choosing these two movies, what you have also mentioned earlier, was that both movies have very, very aptly portrayed how these people whom we consider as agency-less are actually not agency-less. They have an agency that was given to them by the Constitution of India, but there are few people who are in system and who are manipulating and exploiting it in order to, they customize it as per their own profit, or as per their own business, or as per their own views. So what was interesting for us, or what we are looking in this movie, is that these people also have an agency. It is only a matter of realization. If you look at these movies, both are based on real life events, right? Both have somebody who is in power. One is an advocate, one is a IPS officer. But if you look at Jai Bhim, you don't know the caste of Chandra. You don't know to which caste he belongs. And Justice Chandru never talked about his own caste. Right? So this is what makes Jai Bhim a stronger portrayal. And if you look at that tribal woman, right, there are some scenes, I mean, I would say that this is a paper in progress. This is a paper in progress. We could not talk about the perfect portrayal of the bodies. You know, when you look at these people, I don't know what is it the makeup or the choice or their height and short-heighted and those slim bodies and weak and weaning people, that everything is so exact, you feel as if someone has, you know, held your hand, has taken you to that slum area to show the reality that this is what the reality of these people is. Can you see it? If you can see it, then bear it. And they're not agency-less. They have a voice. Yes, they have a voice, and that is the voice. And that's one dialogue in Jai Bhim, I would say, which Chandru says, "कानून सबसे बड़ा हथियार है, सबसे बड़ी ताकत है. आप इसे किसी को बचाने के लिए इस्तेमाल करें या किसी को मारने के लिए, ये आप पर डिपेंड करता है." So the question is again left to the audience. The ball is in our court. How are we using it? So this is to clear the dust of the conscience of the entire society, that they are not agency-less. So that was the whole purview. That was the aim of both of us, how we were trying to look at this movie as a text, because both of us are not experts in reading films. And I have my scholarship in African American literature, so I could definitely relate to it, and that's why I mentioned Ralph Allison's Invisible Man. Hope we have answered the questions truthfully. Thank you.
Okay, the last question for Neeraj. What is your opinion on narratives like Kaala encashing the popularity of Savarna superstars to garner more viewers? Can you see this as Savarna appropriation, or is it a good marketing strategy? Very brief answer, last question.
Yeah, there is no harm in portraying someone who comes from this Savarna background. So yeah, it is a proper marketing strategy as well to strengthen this ideology, maybe strengthening the narratives through the big cinematic sphere. As the Sumit Samos also argued that Kaala is not a Rajnikant film. It's a film about Bahujan anti-caste assertion. So yeah, it's not only about Rajnikant.
Perfect. Okay. I think all of these papers really should be developed and published eventually. And I wish all of our speakers all the best in getting that done. So had a great time today. Let me thank you all for your really nice papers and wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
to those who have asked questions. These are also feedbacks. And thank you, Karthick sir, for your suggestions and your feedback. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone. Thank you.